Imagine for a second that you are standing on the precipice of a massive, life-altering moral decision.
Right, like you're right on the edge.
Exactly. You are about to do something, deep down you really shouldn't. What actually stops you?
It's a great question to ask yourself.
Yeah, I want you to take a moment to really think about the physical sensation of that restraint. Is it an argument happening up in your prefrontal cortex?
Like a logical debate about the pros and cons.
Right. Or is it a feeling right in the center of your chest, like a sudden physical flinch in your gut?
And it turns out that exact distinction, head versus chest, logic versus feeling it, isn't just some quirk of human psychology.
No, it's not. According to the sources we are unpacking today, that difference might literally dictate the fate of entire civilizations.
Yeah, we are looking at a stack of incredibly rigorous philosophical materials today. They're centered around some foundational notes for a document titled The Heartscape, Philosophical Foundations of Global Conscience.
And it's a fascinating read.
It really is. The core argument running through all of this material is that humanity does not experience conscience in a unified way.
Right.
The architecture of our morality has been fundamentally shaped and in some cases heavily distorted by the languages we speak.
So the mission for this deep dive is to trace those linguistic blind spots. We are going to look at how a simple translation issue can snowball into massive global consequences.
Absolutely massive consequences.
Yeah, and ultimately, we want to peel back those cultural layers to find what the sources call the precognitive gate of goodness.
Which is a mechanism that doesn't belong to any one culture, but to the entire human species.
Okay, let's unpack this. But to get there, we really have to put every civilization under the exact same impartial microscope. Zero geopolitical bias.
Exactly. And the best place to start that examination is right in the dictionary.
Just looking at the words themselves?
Yeah, looking at the structural difference between the Western concept of conscience and the Chinese concept. So the Latin root of the Western word is conscientia. If you break that down, it translates to knowing with.
Knowing with, so it's cognitive.
Right. It is fundamentally an epistemic act. It's a mental exercise. You are gathering evidence and reasoning your way to a moral conclusion.
Okay, but contrast that with the Chinese concept, which is Lianqian.
Yeah, Lianxian.
It is composed of two characters, right? Liang, which means innate goodness, and Xin, meaning heart.
A good heart.
Yes, the good heart. It is an innate capacity, a physical feeling that registers before your mind even begins to process an argument.
The structural difference there is massive.
Yeah.
Because if we rely on the Western concept, this whole idea of knowing or reasoning, it operates almost like a terms and conditions legal contract.
Oh, totally. Because if your conscience is just an intellectual argument in your head, well, I mean, human beings are incredibly smart.
Well, we can always find a loophole.
Exactly. You can hire an internal mental lawyer to justify almost any action if you just debate it long enough.
Right.
But the Chinese concept, Liangjin, operates more like a physical deadbolt on a door.
Or, if we look back to the ancient Greeks, Socrates had a very similar concept with his daimonion.
Oh, right. The daemonian.
Yeah, it's a perfect historical parallel. He described it as an inner voice that only ever forbade him from taking certain actions.
They never told him what to do.
Exactly. It never commanded him. It only issued a veto.
A precognitive veto. It is a pure, unadulterated no that fires in your nervous system before you can even formulate a counter-argument.
Like a gate.
Yeah, a gate. But because the West lexicalized conscience as a form of knowledge, our sources suggest this profound architectural diagnosis.
Right, the idea that the West suffers from a structural conscience deficiency.
Which sounds intense, so we should probably unpack what deficiency means in this context.
Yeah, because the sources are not claiming that individuals in the West are inherently immoral.
No, not at all.
It is an architectural critique. By demoting conscience from a physical precognitive gate down to a debatable proposition, a society creates the conditions where it can reason its way into almost anything.
So it's a systemic issue.
Exactly. The text points to the mid-20th century to illustrate this, specifically the covert operations orchestrated by the Dulles brothers.
Right, so the 1953 operations in Iran and the 1954 operations in Guatemala.
Yes.
Now, I'm trying to draw the line here between a Latin vocabulary word and a CIA covert operation. I mean, it seems like a massive leap to say a linguistic quirk cause the overthrow of a government.
Sure, it isn't a direct causal magic trick. It's about the environment that language builds.
Okay.
The people who planned those 1950s operations, they had the word conscience in their vocabulary.
Right.
The legal institutions were functioning. The universities were flourishing. But the architecture of their decision-making placed the deed where the good heart couldn't reach it to issue a veto.
They maximized strategic knowledge, but allowed that innate goodness to atrophy.
Precisely. When your primary moral mechanism is a debate, the smartest debater in the room can justify any collateral damage for a perceived greater good.
They just philosophized the gate away.
Yeah, they engineered it out of the way entirely.
So if language creates the architecture that allows a state to bypass its own moral deadbolt, how does this scale up?
What do you mean?
Well, if we are talking about structural deficiencies, how do the sources categorize modern actors? Like, where do places like the United States or Israel fit into this framework of civilizations?
Oh, I see. Well, the sources rely heavily on descriptive historical frameworks. They draw on historians like Arnold Toynbee and Fernand Braudel to define these terms.
Okay, and under that lens.
Under that historical lens, neither the U.S. nor Israel are civilizations.
Really?
Descriptively, they are states. I mean, the United States is roughly 250 years old. Israel is 78. A true civilization is a massive, longue-durée formation that outlasts the temporary political states born within it.
Like Egypt.
Exactly. Egyptian civilization outlived its pharaohs by millennia. Chinese civilization survives the rise and fall of its dynasties.
So, descriptively, the U.S. is a state acting as the present core of Western civilization.
Yes, and Israel is a young state drawing on a much older Abrahamic heritage. They are mid-examination. They haven't been tested across the massive arc of time required to be categorized as a civilization.
Okay, so that is the descriptive definition. But the text also introduces a normative definition, right? Judging a civilization by its adherence to that good heart, that Linangzhen.
Yeah, and the conclusion there is pretty stark.
It really is.
Yeah.
If we define civilization by an unbroken adherence to the good heart, every single one of them fails.
This is where the sources introduce a crucial methodological tool. They call it the Wei Zhen principle.
Which translates to a principle of symmetry, right?
Exactly. Symmetry. If we are going to study global conscience impartially, we must hold all actors to the exact same standard.
Because anything else is just geopolitics wearing a halo.
Perfectly said.
We have to look at the structural removal of the conscience gate, wherever it happens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Greco-Roman world, which is celebrated as the cradle of Western democracy, was built entirely on a foundation of slavery.
Right.
The West has the Dulles brothers and those Cold War covert operations, and Chinese history, despite having the linguistic perfection of Liangzhen, contains the Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap, and actions in Xinjiang.
The symmetry principle demands an honest accounting from everyone.
It prevents us from pointing fingers.
Exactly. It prevents us from falling into the trap of declaring one culture inherently evil and another purely good. The focus remains strictly on identifying when and how the biological gate was structurally bypassed by the state apparatus.
Now, as we talk about these differing cultural paradigms, the Western debate versus the Eastern heart, I keep thinking about the native traditions in North America.
Okay.
There is a very famous Cherokee parable about the two wolves that seems to kind of bridge this gap.
Ah, the two wolves.
Yeah. It is the story of a grandfather telling his grandson about a terrible fight happening inside him between two wolves.
Right.
One is evil, representing anger, greed, and lies. The other is good, representing joy, peace, and love. The grandson asks, which wolf will win? And the grandfather replies, the one you feed.
It's everywhere online.
Yeah, and I've always read that as a beautiful alternative way to look at the inner moral struggle.
It is an incredibly popular piece of internet wisdom, I'll give you that. But the sources actually use that exact story to demonstrate how deeply entrenched the Western deficiency is.
Wait, why?
Because that parable isn't Cherokee at all.
Wait, really? It's completely fabricated.
It is a 20th century evangelical invention.
You're kidding.
Now, scholars trace its modern popularity to figures like the Southern Baptist minister Billy Graham. He actually published a version of it in a 1978 book.
Wow.
Yeah, it was constructed as a Christian parable dressed up in Native American imagery to push a very specific Western binary concept.
That completely changes the meaning of the story. It isn't indigenous wisdom at all. It's basically the concept of original sin wearing a disguise.
Exactly. It forces a Manichaean worldview, a literal war between pure good and pure evil fighting to the death inside you, where your only option is to starve the bad one.
And that binary conflict is the exact Western conscience's judgment structure we were analyzing earlier.
Precisely. It replaces the physical gate with an internal battlefield.
So if the two wolves story is just a Trojan horse for Western intellectualism, what does actual indigenous conscience look like? Like, what got overwritten by that fake story?
Well, when the sources examine authentic traditions relying on native scholars and native languages, a very different pattern emerges.
What did they find?
Authentic Cherokee teachings, for example, do not focus on an internal war of extermination. They focus on harmony and the relational care of the planet.
That makes a lot more sense.
And we see this replicated globally. The Akan people of Ghana use the concept of Taboa, which translates to the animal in one's head.
The animal in one's head.
Yeah, and Akan philosophy insists this inner moral sense is created innately good, and its primary function is oriented toward the welfare of the community.
Wow.
Kwame Nkrumah, who is Ghana's first president, even wrote a philosophical work called Consciencism that built upon this communal foundation.
Okay, so it's relational, and the pattern holds in Rwanda too, right?
exact.
Because their word for conscience, camera, is situated entirely in the heart, not the head.
Exactly. And the Lakota concept of mitakuye oyasio translates to all my relations. It frames conscience as a profound kinship with all living beings.
So when you stack all of these together, the Western intellectualization of conscience, turning it into a solitary, reasoned argument in the courtroom in your head, it looks less like the default human condition and way more like a historical outlier.
It really does. The challenge, however, is studying these differences without falling prey to our own biases.
Right, because everyone wants to defend their own culture.
Exactly. If a Chinese scholar presents the virtues of Lianzhen, a Western critic will almost reflexively dismiss it as foreign morality. And if a Western scholar defends conscientia, it carries all the historical baggage of Western intellectualism.
So how do we break the stalemate?
The sources introduce the perspective of the Mameluco.
Mameluco, that is a fascinating term. Historically, it refers to someone of mixed heritage, right? But the sources are using it as a philosophical vantage point.
Yes. The Mameluco represents a perspective born from crossing borders. Picture someone who has lived in Shanghai, Macau, and Brazil, someone who speaks 5 languages fluently.
So they don't really have one specific geopolitical loyalty.
Right. A Mameluco belongs to no single flag. Because they aren't instinctively defending a single homeland, they can hold both the Western conscientia and the Chinese Lianzhen simultaneously without bias.
They can evaluate the entire human landscape objectively.
Exactly.
And when a Mameluco looks past the dictionaries and the cultural baggage, they notice a pattern that completely shifts the origin story of human morality.
Yeah, the sources go way back for this.
We've talked about conscience as an argument, and conscience as a feeling. But where did the biological mechanism actually come from?
Right.
I mean, it wasn't handed down from the sky, and it wasn't invented in some Greek academy. The sources point to the agrarian world.
They look at observations from rural communities globally, from the reverence for cows in India to the Miao and Zhuang people in southwestern China.
And the key figure in this origin story is the laboring beast, the water buffalo.
The buffalo, exactly.
Think about the mechanics of life in an ancient rural village. A water buffalo plows the fields. It pulls the heavy cargo. It turns the mill to grind the grain.
It does everything.
It labors its entire life for the survival of the village, and when it finally dies, its flesh feeds the people. Its work is unending and absolute.
So how does witnessing that unending labor translate into a moral framework?
Well, according to the deep dive into these notes, it creates a psychological and biological mechanism based on debt. The animal gives everything to ensure the human survives.
And the human heart, observing this, registers a massive imbalance.
Exactly. The feeling of receiving a gift you can never possibly repay is gratitude.
Right.
But gratitude is not just a static emotion. Over millennia of human evolution, that profound gratitude hardwires itself into the nervous system. It ripens into a biological ledger.
Fairness is conscience grown up.
Yes. That is one of the most striking syntheses in the text. Conscience wakes up when you realize you have been given more than you have returned.
And that 160th of a second flinch we talked about at the very beginning.
Yeah.
That is the body's alarm system going off when that ancient ledger of fairness is violated.
So with that mature, evolved sense of fairness in mind, the sources invite us to re-examine one of the most famous stories in Western religion.
The story of Moses coming down from Mount Sinai and smashing the stone tablet.
Yes. But to do this, the text applies the lens of the 17th century philosopher Baruch Spinoza. Let's walk through Spinoza's framework, because the traditional reading of that story is incredibly binary.
Oh, very binary.
The Israelites are pure evil for building the golden calf, and Moses is the righteous authority figure who smashes the rules because he is acting as an instrument of divine wrath,
Spinoza dismantled that binary entirely with his concept of Deus sive natura.
which translates to God or nature.
Exactly. He argued that God and nature are functionally the same. Therefore, the divine does not possess human emotions. It does not rage, and it does not get jealous.
Right.
Spinoza believed that a God who breaks things in a fit of anger is simply a human passion projected onto the cosmos.
He viewed prophets not as men with magical access to absolute unquestionable truth, but as men with vivid imaginations and incredibly powerful moral convictions.
So applying Spinoza's lens to Sinai changes everything.
It really does. When Moses smashes the tablets, that rage was a human passion. He was a man in the grip of intense anger, mistaking his own emotional reaction for a divine command.
He let his passion override that mature ledger-keeping fairness.
And the Mamluka perspective, the principle of symmetry, we talked about it, demands that we look at the people worshiping the golden calf with that exact same fairness.
Because they weren't cartoon villains reveling in pure evil.
No, they were utterly terrified. They were abandoned in a harsh desert. And out of fear, they reached for the only sacred grammar they actually understood.
They reached for the agrarian animal-honoring grammar we just discussed.
Exactly. The bowl was the regional vocabulary of the divine, much like the Apis bull of Egypt. They were speaking the ancient language of the laboring beast, trying to find some semblance of comfort and order in the chaos.
True, Mameluco fairness requires us to hold all of these complex realities at once.
Without acquitting or condemning anyone entirely.
Right. Moses wasn't just an elite raised in an Egyptian palace. He spent 40 years as a shepherd living among animals. He should have understood that deep agrarian instinct.
At the same time, the people, driven by fear, broke a covenant almost immediately after making it.
And the ledger-keeping heart, the conscience, absolutely registers a promise broken that quickly. True fairness, which these sources argue is the absolute highest form of conscience, is the faculty that can hold the frightened calf makers, the herdsman prophet, and the broken tablets all in a single honest view.
It looks at the entire messy, complex human reality without flattening any of it into simple categories of good and evil.
And that ability to hold the complexity is the exact symmetry that a deficiency civilization lacks.
We've covered a massive amount of philosophical ground today.
We really have.
And what becomes incredibly clear from this deep dive is that conscience isn't just a Greek intellectual argument. It isn't just a perfect Chinese character, and it certainly isn't a fabricated internet parable about feeding wolves.
No, it is fundamentally deeper than any linguistic construct.
Right.
The sources define it as that 160th of a second precognitive gait. It is a physical flinch in the nervous system, an innate capacity shared by every single human on Earth.
Regardless of the flag they fly or the dictionary they use to describe it.
Exactly. It was born in ancient agrarian fields out of a profound gratitude for the animals that kept us alive. And over thousands of years, it matured into the complex biological faculty of fairness.
It is the deadbolt on the door. It is the pure, unadulterated no that fires before the mind can even begin to invent an excuse.
So as you process all the paradigms we've unpacked today, I would encourage you to reflect on your own 160th of a second.
That initial physical flinch.
Yes. The next time you face a difficult moral choice, pay attention to how you handle it. Are you treating your conscience as an internal lawyer that you need to out-argue? Or are you treating it as a gate that you need to respect?
That is the essential question for us as individuals. But the sources leave us with one final, deeply unsettling thought about the future.
Oh, right, the AI aspect.
Yeah, specifically regarding artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And it is something I want you to mull over as you go about your day. We've established that the human conscience operates in a biological 160th of a second gate.
Right.
But as you navigate the modern world, you are increasingly governed by algorithms and AI systems that make decisions in a millionth of a second.
Way faster.
They operate infinitely faster than your biological good heart can even register a flinch. So here's the question. If humanity couldn't even properly translate the concept of conscience across our own languages without engineering a structural deficiency, without engineering a structural deficiency, how on earth are we going to write the code for it in the machines that will run our future?